Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of Strangers Worth Meeting. I've got a wild card episode for you today, and I'm quite excited about it. Joining me is an old friend, Connor Kerrigan, who is currently the communications director for the Democratic candidate for the Missouri Secretary of State. So, getting involved in the political scene in Missouri, St. Louis, my old stomping grounds. Connor, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on, man.
Thanks, man. I'm really excited to talk to you again.
Yeah, it has been a while. I think that's almost I think that's a theme of this episode to me as I was thinking about this and thinking about, reaching out to you because it's almost like in a way we are strangers again. We haven't been able to
Yeah,
be in contact for a few years now. So I have like all these new things that I want to know about you, but we've got this great background of being friends. So I think it's going to be kind of a unique episode in that way. I'm really looking forward to, I don't know, just throwing that, like I said, wild card kind of into the into the podcast mix
yeah,
here. Just kind of
absolutely.
going with it. So give us an idea of your surroundings today. Where can we picture you, since you and I can't be in the same space due to this coronavirus thing?
Yeah, so I'm in my apartment because I'm sheltering in place. Um, and I live in the central west end of St. Louis. I live on the ninth floor of an apartment building, and my bedroom window overlooks the St. Louis Basilica. So as we talk and I look out my window, I see a bunch of trees, and then peeking out above all of them, I see the dome of the St. Louis Basilica, which I think is one of the most beautiful buildings in the entire city. And I get to wake up to it every morning. It's incredible.
That's awesome. Andrea and I lived in St. Louis for a number of years after college. We lived in her parents' basement because that's where there was to live at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I always liked it out there, and it was for us that was like the opportunity for us to start our business, and so I have very fond memories of St. Louis in general. I'm to give you a picture back. My recording studio out in Tucson these days, where we're hiding out for the quarantine,
Mm-hmm.
is my truck. Because at our rig, I only have so internet connection. Like, it's enough to do email. My clients can relax. I'm still working, but it's not quite
Mm-hmm.
enough for a podcast. It makes me nervous. So I get
Mm-hmm.
to chill in a Walmart parking lot and make friends. People walk by. They stare at me on my microphone and they're like, "Is this guy following me or like what's going?" It looks very very sketchy. I know that for sure. Oh, and I just realized, you know what? Maybe this will sound better. I hope the folks listening enjoyed the fact that I remember to turn my engine off now. Um, I'm supposed to kind of do that.
I need to turn
Um,
off the engine in my podcast studio real quick.
yeah, that's so weird. You know what? It just is what it is. We got to make it work. Luckily, like, it's not a small sedan. I've only ever had small cars, and now I have this giant truck for obvious reasons, and it's
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. Ooh,
Yeah.
it's like a home office in this thing. So, not to harp too long on my big truck, which is a sort of a common mistake we all make, but so tell me about, why don't we start with the job? Because I want to know how you came to be doing the job that it is that you're doing and working with Yinka Falati. I think I
Mm-hmm.
got that right. Out there in St. Louis. Like, how did you come to be doing that?
Yeah, so it's a long story, and I know we got time, but I'll still try to condense it a little bit. But when after college, I moved to Chicago, and I ended up working in advertising. And after a while, that lifestyle just wasn't really doing it for me, and I ended up getting involved in a nonprofit called the North Lawndale Employment Network. They work with returning citizens, folks who are coming out of incarceration. They put them through a workforce development program, and then once they graduate from the program, then I was in charge of the department that connected to the businesses that found them employment. So we were working to when folks come out of incarceration, we want to make sure that they don't go back. So that was what our job was. While I was there, I met my now fiance Io, and about a year and a half into our relationship, she said, "Well, I'm moving to Missouri because I got accepted to medical school." Um, you know, and it was I'm either going to move to Missouri with Io or we're going to break up and I'm going to stay in Chicago. And I decided I was up for an adventure. And so we moved to Missouri. And I was doing some freelance work, some freelance communications work when we first got here. And then a friend of mine who I had worked with while I was in Chicago had a connection to the Human Rights Campaign, which is the national LGBTQ organization, nonprofit that advocates for LGBTQ rights and issues. They needed a political field organizer in St. Louis, and he recommended that they call me. So they did, and I I got the call and they said it was 2018, by the way. So this is 2 years after the 2016 election. It's the midterm election. And I get a call from someone and they said, hey, this is Lindsay. I'm with HRC and I was wondering, if you were interested in the field organizing position in St. Louis. And I said, what is Hillary Rodham Clinton doing in St. Louis? they said, no, the Human Rights Campaign. So I got involved.
That's how much you knew at that point. You were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"What?"
So I got involved with them through the election, and then just you meet people through all the work, and I ended up working in the Missouri State House of Representatives for a few months, and then I was very fortunate that there was a nonprofit called Empower Missouri that also focused on criminal justice issues, which is kind of where my interest had lied for a long time. They hired me on as their communications director. And then, so my fiance was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and the Nigerian community in the Midwest of America, it's large, but it's very small. Everyone kind of knows everyone. So I had met, a million aunties and uncles through church and just through, being with my fiance. And one of her aunties knew this guy named Yinka Falati, who was running for Secretary of State in Missouri, and knew that he was looking for a communications person. And so her auntie connected us. And when he first reached out to me, I didn't know that it was for a job. I thought he was reaching out because he wanted, some volunteer work or something. And so I was literally in a job interview with him over Zoom because we were in different parts of the state, not realizing I was in a job interview. And
Right,
he was like,
exactly.
well, how are you looking to get involved? And I was like, well, there's actually some legal issues with that because I work for a 501c3. We're not allowed to endorse candidates. I don't know if I can offer you much help. And then he was like, well, what if you weren't working there? And I was like, oh. So it took some time, but I eventually did say yes, and here we are. And the director of communications for a campaign, basically every word that comes out of the campaign, all the relationship with reporters, all the statements that the campaign makes, the social media aspect of the campaign, all of that falls under my purview, and so I handle all that for the campaign.
That sounds like a big responsibility and something I really know very little about. I'm not terribly politically minded outside of just sort of the theoretical sense of things.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember. Were you kind of engaged in that? And well, I guess I should give people kind of the background here, which is that of course we went to college together. We were quite good friends, hung out
Hmm.
fairly often, played quite a bit of music together.
Hmm.
And I, of course, was there studying theater, which sort of turned into business. And then you were studying music, right? Was your major, if
Yep.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you did a bunch of other things too. And that was kind of the benefit of going to a really small liberal arts school, is that you could do a lot of things. You didn't just have to stick to the one thing you were supposed to be doing. If you were creative
Yeah.
enough, there were opportunities. And so I can't remember if you were politically minded yourself back in those days, or was that like a change that happened for you at some point?
I was politically minded, but the opposite political beliefs that I have now in college. I went into college as a Republican, voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. I don't know if I should admit that on the record. It might lose me a job one day. But yeah, when we were in college, I wasn't politically involved. I didn't, volunteer or anything with any campaigns, but after we got out of college and I moved to Chicago and I started meeting some more people. Actually, my boss at the advertising uh, agency that I worked at was one of the people who convinced me that politics and nonprofit work was where I belonged. And I don't know if I've ever told her that, but she's the reason that I stopped working there, not because she was a bad boss, but because the conversations I had with her convinced me that I needed to get involved and give back politically or in the nonprofit space. And that's how I made the shift.
So you feel kind of more engaged in what it is that you do now than formerly. It's less like, advertising in Chicago, which I can say I know a little bit about, at least working in the marketing space.
Yeah.
Um, that wasn't your game. That wasn't inspiring you, and now you've found something that does.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a very good way to put it.
So you okay, I gotta circle back around now because now I'm intrigued by something. Like any college student, we all had political thoughts. You know what I mean? We all had
Hmm.
these different things, whether it's things you grew up with or brand new ideas to you, and that's kind of what it is. It's like you're on this pendulum of just like, oh, I grew up one way, and all of a sudden I'm
Hmm.
meeting people with completely different thoughts, and that just really just spins you around. But I think that I mean, I take issue with the idea that you would have to say, oh, I was politically minded in one direction, and then that might affect me being able to, say work on someone's campaign in the future. I think you might even be right, and it kind of makes me sad because like the idea that you wouldn't be able to change your mind um, after 4 years or I mean that's a significant amount of time, enough for you to change your mind about things.
Hmm.
Um, and you go even farther anyway. But that does bug me. I think my issue is how divisive we are, and the idea that there's only two ways to look at issues is just upsetting to me.
I
It's
I couldn't
sad.
agree more, and I know that sounds almost hypocritical because I work for one team in this two-team debate. But no, I think you're exactly right, and I think everyone across the political spectrum would benefit greatly from realizing that every issue that we disagree about is much more nuanced than the media or anyone tries to make it.
Right.
You're allowed to hold a lot of these conflicting thoughts in your head at the same time, and that's probably actually healthy.
Right, right. Well, so I read about the dude who you're working for, and he seems like an awesome guy, and then
Yeah.
like exactly what you want from a politician. Like you want this track record of the stuff this guy has done. I mean, he's an actual vet who went on 2 tours in
Hmm.
Kuwait, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yep.
he's been working with nonprofits and has a law degree. I mean, this is a person who's set himself up for life in the political game. And I think all three of those things are experiences that we should value in political leaders.
Hmm.
Sounds like you've hitched your cart to a pretty cool horse there.
Yeah. No, I super lucked out on this one. I so he's running for the Missouri Secretary of State. So on the federal level, the Secretary of State uh, handles foreign policy, right? Our current Secretary of State travels the globe and meets with foreign leaders and handles foreign policy. But on a state level, the Secretary of State handles elections. They're often called the chief elections officer of the state. And voting rights was an issue that I became hyper interested in my time in Chicago because I was working with folks who were coming out of incarceration. These were felons. These were folks who went away for misdemeanors, and the rights that get stripped away from you when you go to when you are arrested, when you go to prison, when you are found guilty of a crime is, I mean, it's innumerable how many get taken away, but one of the main ones is in many states your right to vote gets taken away. And that really, really upset me, learning about it and realizing that the folks that I was working with, their opinion of who should be in charge is just as, if not much more valuable than my opinion of who should be in charge. And so to be working for an individual who like you said, I mean, He immigrated here when he was 7 years old from Lagos, Nigeria, which my fiance did the same at 2 years old. Um, he went to the military academy at West Point, served two tours in Kuwait over 6 years. He was on tank units, and then came back, got his law degree, and was doing a bunch of community focused nonprofit work in St. Louis. And his kind of whole thing was, as he went through the nonprofit space and working as a lawyer, he saw where the injustices are, and he realized that so many of them come from the state level. And when you're looking at the state level, well, the thing that matters the most is who you elect into positions. And in Missouri, there's this thing called the ballot initiative process, where essentially citizens can change the Constitution if they get enough votes on something. And that's a really simplistic way of putting it. But uh, anyway, his whole theory is, if you can't properly, if the Secretary of State isn't allowing people to vote and they're making it harder for people to vote, or they're changing the language on the ballot initiative to make it less appealing to voters, it doesn't really matter what work you do. You're going to keep getting, batted back by that. So that's why he decided to run for Secretary of State. And I mean, making sure that everyone who's eligible has the right to vote and has access to the vote, that's not a hard thing to get enthusiastic about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something we can all get behind. It doesn't matter where you fall on a political spectrum because what you're talking about is the roots of democracy. The idea that
Mm-hmm.
you would make a vote confusing or difficult or hard to access, I mean, that's an issue. That's
Right. Yeah.
that's sort of the point. So I wanted your take on this. I've seen you're one of the very few people who still would use Twitter and send me tweets. And I think I forget what it was. You congratulated me maybe on getting engaged. I was either
Yeah.
that or getting married. I think it was getting engaged. I didn't see your tweet for a year because that was how long I hadn't checked my Twitter. But I see that now I'm back. I'm back. You believed in me. And I'm using it again. I like it. At T Hicks in Life, everybody. But you had my 10 followers. But um you've been posting quite a bit of things in the midst of the coronavirus thing, and
Hmm.
obviously we've got some major voting coming up in this year. It almost doesn't. It's crazy to me. It doesn't feel like an election year because
Hmm.
at this
Right.
point the whole talk would be political, but now it's just sort of like, okay, we've got our assumed candidates, and here we go, and we'll see you in
Hmm.
November. And it's almost like we're not going to hear about it again because coronavirus is too sensational, too exciting, whatever. So it feels like an odd year, but I'm assuming this is going to impact voting. It probably already is. It certainly is impacting the primaries. Um,
Hmm.
how do we allow people to be able to vote without getting mass crowds of people together? Is that a concern, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's our number one concern right now, and that's what the campaign is shouting that from the rooftop. So the issue in Missouri, um, so in about 35, 36 states, I can't remember the exact number, but it's definitely the majority of states. I think it's around 35 or 36. Folks are allowed to vote. It's called absentee vote by mail. No excuse absentee vote by mail. So that means that you just you submit a form. You say, "Hey, I want a ballot mailed to me," and then I'm going to mail it back to you, and you count that ballot, and that's my vote. I don't have to leave my house. I can take some time to look at the ballot and make sure I know about all the candidates and who's running, and I can make an informed decision. But in Missouri, you have to have an excuse to request an absentee ballot. You have to say, well, I'm not going to be there on November 3rd, and here's why I'm not going to be there. Or, there's five or so reasons. And if you don't have any of those reasons, you don't get an absentee ballot, and you have to show up to the polling place, which is obviously, an issue right now. We don't want a lot of people going to their polling locations and touching the same surfaces and using the same pens and all these things. And so right now the debate in Missouri is there's a part of that statute that says that one of the reasons that you can request an absentee ballot is confinement due to illness. And the debate right now that's actually going to the Missouri Supreme Court is, can concerns over COVID-19 be considered confinement due to illness? Can you say, hey, I'm at home because I don't want to get sick, so I
Right.
need an absentee ballot? And
Right.
if the court decides that yes, that fits in to that definition, then we need to start figuring out how we're going to get absentee ballots to all the folks who are going to recommend them. So it's this big mess, and it's taking a court battle to figure this out. Um, but we're obviously staunchly of the belief that, I mean, if it were up to me, every voter in Missouri would get an absentee ballot mailed to them without them having to request it, and they would mail it back, and it would be a super simple process. But we're trying to figure out what the path forward is right now.
What is the proposed opposition to that? Is it about voter fraud, or what's the card that would be against that?
Yeah, so it's the one thing that I can say confidently is that we're a little better on our messaging than our opponents. They're struggling to find their argument, and it's been a lot of we've called it, passing the buck like a hot potato. We've seen the governor say that the current Secretary of State is in charge of that, and we've seen the Secretary of State say, well, that's under the that's under the governor's jurisdiction. But the two arguments they've came up with, the first is, like you said, the voter fraud thing. Well, there's going to be a whole bunch of voter fraud. Well, 36 states do this every year, and there's no statistically significant increase in voter fraud, and they've studied it, they've seen it. There's no evidence to show that mail-in voting increases voter fraud at all. And then the other thing they're saying is, well, the letter of the law right here says, these are the only reasons, and we can't just go and change the law. Well, there's a couple things about that.
I like that
You know,
mentality, by the way. We can't
yeah,
just change the thing that was made to be changed
yeah,
in the correct circumstances.
yeah, yeah. And
This has
so,
to stand. This was written in stone. We can't do that. How
yeah,
could we?
right. Harry Truman brought this down on a stone tablet from the Missouri mountaintops, and
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
how this has to be.
All
Um,
hail. Or who else is it in St. Louis? Charles Lindbergh? That's the other big
yeah,
big
yeah,
guy out there, right?
yeah. Well, I
Okay.
see my first 2 years ish in Missouri were in Jefferson City, which is the state capital, and Harry Truman is just, I mean, he's everywhere there. He's the man from Missouri. Um, but anyway, yeah. So it's they're struggling to find a reason, and we did hear a couple folks say the quiet part out loud, and they said, well, you know, absentee voting would be bad for Republicans. You're like, yeah, but what would be good for the voters, And so we're trying to educate. We're trying to make sure that people realize, that voter fraud isn't an issue. Um, they can change the law. It's tough, but it can be done, and it can be done in time. And we're also pretty sure that the governor has some more authority under the Emergency Powers Act than they're letting on. One of the things that he did with those emergency powers was delay an election. We were supposed to have municipal elections in April, and since we weren't ready, we weren't prepared to hold elections during a global pandemic, they pushed them back to June. So if you can push an election back by 2 months, you're telling me you can't just send people some mail to send them back,
Right.
So it's, I'm obviously one-sided on this, and I'm pretty biased, but I haven't heard a good argument yet why we shouldn't be putting all of our efforts that we can, into making sure that people can vote safely.
And the thing you'd be most worried about would be probably just general voter suppression. The idea that you make it difficult for anyone to cast their vote, which is not
Hmm.
good democracy.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that we saw recently is in Wisconsin, their primary elections. The city of Milwaukee had something like, I'm not going to remember the exact number, and I wish I did, but they had over 100 polling places in the city, and they were down to five on election day because poll workers
Right.
had quit because they weren't prepared. They had people standing in long lines, um, going in and voting during a global pandemic, from a disease that spreads on surfaces. Um,
Yeah.
and so we're scared that Wisconsin was a precursor to Missouri, that we're going to see
Yeah.
something similar here. And like you said, I personally, and I can pretty confidently say the campaign is opposed to any attempt at voter suppression, and that includes telling people that they have to decide between their health and wellness and their right to vote.
Well, yeah, and I mean, especially when you consider that a major population of voters are people in categorically high risk
Hmm.
instances. I mean, what I'm trying to say in a political way is old people like to vote,
Yeah.
and old people can get not just sick from this one. It doesn't just take you out. This one
Right.
could be the end here,
Yeah.
and that's no joke if you're in those high risk categories. So
Yeah.
this is a big deal. I like this part of the conversation. I can't say I've had a guest on where we've gone anywhere. This isn't even political. That's actually what I like about it is that I don't think I could do a political episode. I mean, there's a lot of podcasts that love to
Yeah.
go there. I think what I like about this is what we're talking about is like democracy in the face of a crisis. I think
Hmm.
that's something that anyone can get behind if they believe that democracy works.
Yeah.
So it's fun talking about this. I'm gonna switch us around though here. I want to
Okay.
know kind of during this quarantine, what have you been getting up to? You mostly stuck inside, living in a city as you are.
Yeah.
But like, what joy do you have in your life right now? Where's the where's the silver lining, man? Because
Yeah,
we're all
that's
just
the question
stuck
for
inside.
everyone. Well, so I'm in a weird situation because of my job. I actually live with the campaign manager for the campaign. So I'm the communications director. The campaign manager is kind of the person who oversees the whole campaign. He's my roommate, and so I spend a lot of time working. If
Yeah,
I'm honest, because I live with my boss. But the biggest joy that I have right now, hands down, is the pups. I've got two dogs. You know Doyle because I had him when we were in
yes,
college. But about a year and 2 months ago, I think I'm doing that math right. My fiance and I adopted a border collie labradoodle mixed named Baylor, and he's a ball of energy. He's about 60 pounds. So we're teaching him how to catch frisbees. Going outside and staying away from folks and playing fetch with him and getting outdoors. And that's been a real blast, just hanging out with the dogs and using this time to train them and get them able to do tricks and catch stuff. It's been really good.
it's a good moment for dogs in America. Dogs
Yeah.
are stoked right now. The thing that cracks me up the most is I literally keep coming across articles of dogs that are spraining their tails because they wag them all day.
Yeah.
Um, that is hilarious to me. But you do think about it, dogs that just get stuck in apartments all day when people go off for 8 hours. That makes me sad. It's like, oh man,
Hmm.
but at least they have someone. But I feel like getting outside has been a huge thing. We came to Tucson, where we were at formerly. We were in Texas. We had all these shoots lined up. We were going to go do down in Florida and on the East Coast, and it was all booked and beautiful, and we had to postpone everything.
Right.
And in East Texas, we were near some national forests, but they even had to close those down. I assume for their staff, to not have rangers around. Um, but so we said, like, where's one place we could go where we can actually guarantee we'll be able to get outside? And we know of a great place out in Tucson where it's private trails, and so we can still be able to use those responsibly. And because I don't think I could be inside this long. I will get majorly depressed. Like I'll be nothing like myself if I can't be outside every day, doing at least something. So it's good you guys have the dogs. So your fiance Io, who I have not met but seems lovely from what I've seen online. You guys don't live together?
No, so we don't. I live in St. Louis right now, and she lives in Kirksville, Missouri, which is where her med school is. Um, but taking every precaution possible, lots of hand sanitizer, lots of avoiding folks. We have been able to see each other during the pandemic, so that's been good. Um,
That's good.
but it's also been tough, not being with her for extended periods of time.
Yeah,
But I was gonna I don't know if this is allowed on your podcast, but I wanted to ask you a question because I
I'll
feel
allow it.
like you're you and Andrea were living this kind of nomadic life already to begin with, and I feel like this had to hit you guys a lot, not nearly as bad as it's hit everyone else. What outside of not being able to do your shoots for work, have you guys really experienced any adverse effects?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different in this lifestyle. The A major thing is that I read a stat yesterday that something like 40% of RV parks in the country are closed right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think primarily, if I had to take just a guess at it, and I think an educated guess because I live this lifestyle, I'd say that's because 40% are probably federal and state owned campgrounds. Most of
Mm-hmm.
the private ones are open. And if you go to generally unpopular places for April and May, which is Tucson because it's 90 degrees here,
Mm-hmm.
you can definitely get a site. So that worked out well for us. We actually can get like a really good deal doing this. I think that the hard part for us was that we have family in Florida, so her parents are out in Florida, and my grandparents are there, and so we were gonna go see them. It's been way too long, and we had to cancel that. And then we also have other family in the Midwest now in Indiana and in Illinois, and we were gearing up to go see those guys afterwards, and that's all canceled now too. So I haven't. I'm. Ooh, I got to think about the last time I saw my parents, which was at my wedding, which was in August. So I haven't seen them in nearly a
Wow.
year. But that's not,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's not been the first time. I mean, I haven't. We've gone way too long of stretches with that being normal.
Yeah.
They've had a lot going on. I had a lot going on. Just I don't know, just being young and having lots to do. And we moved out to Colorado, so there's been a lot of things. I think that's been a hard one for us, is missing our family and friends and having no of when we'll be able to see them again. But and I think the other thing is probably it sounds like a little thing, so I'll admit that it's a little problem compared to a lot of other people's problems. But groceries is hard for us. We have a an RV
Mm.
fridge which doesn't hold that much, and we
Yeah.
also eat a lot of fresh produce. So when the grocery trip is like, if it's impossible to use the Walmart pickup and you got to wait in line, or so we didn't have like any food out in Texas. Luckily in Tucson,
Wow.
there's a ton of like Sprouts out here, which is our main jam. So we get to be able to do that. But I think, but for the whole, I think when you're in a pandemic or any sort of crisis, the best thing you can do is probably live on the road. Like we can go. We happen to know that there's two great things about Arizona, which is that the rates of this are pretty low, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
relatively safe place to be. There's a ton of outdoor space, which is part of that. I think that people aren't all crammed together. And then the other thing we know is that Arizona is a bright red state. So, the odds of a lot of things getting closed down are low, which if you're me, that's an advantage. I mean, I know it's not great for everybody, but if you're me and you get to pick, yeah, go where you can actually
Yeah.
still generally do stuff. So we've been quite safe, and we're not going out other than necessities for sure.
Right.
Um, but I think getting outside was just big for us. We it's confined if we're going to stay inside. It's a small space. It's actually, but it's about as big as my apartment in Denver, to be honest. um, but uh, but yeah, we have to be able to have that component of it. So I don't. Other than that, I guess it's not been bad. I have nothing to complain about compared to the average person right now, for sure,
Right.
for sure.
And that's been the conversation across the board. Has just been, the my biggest complaint is when I moved to Missouri, Io was living in Kirksville, Missouri, which is a very, very small town that is centered around Truman State University, which is um, the undergrad college there, and then her medical school, which is A.T. Still University. And that's about all that town has. It's got about 17,000 people in it. So I went from living on the in Wicker Park in Chicago, which is a super populated, very fun area, um, to being in either Kirksville, which is a very small town, or Jefferson City, which is about 40,000 people, and the the street lights start flashing red at 7 p.m. and the
Yeah.
those cross streets are treated as stop signs, and there's only about three or four bars, and they close at 11 or midnight. And so I spent 2 years in that environment where I wasn't being very social at all, and you knew me in college. That's tough for me. And
Right.
so I finally moved to St. Louis. I moved to the Central West End, which is one of the most hopping parts of St. Louis, and every now no one can hang out and no one's allowed to go anywhere. And so I just
Yeah.
like I was looking so forward to, being social again and living that life, and then this happened. And so again, relatively, I'm doing great. It's just like I'm kind of sad because I don't get to go hang out with my friends.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems like small things to complain about, but then again, it's one of those things where if we start comparing our problems, you can always find someone who's got it worse.
Yeah, of
There's
course.
there's no end to that conversation. So you can have the problems you can have. The difference is I'm probably not going to start blurting out my problems to other people. You know what I mean? Because
Right,
I know that they're relatively small. I
right.
don't need a lot of attention about them. So mostly we just try to make the best of this situation.
Yeah.
I really want to meet Io. She sounds super cool.
She
Um,
is.
when does she finish up with medical school?
Pretty sure never. No, it's
Yeah, it
med
feels
school
like that
is
probably.
there's so many different steps. So her trajectory right now is she's about to take her step one boards, which is kind of like one of the first big major test milestones. So this summer she'll finish with her classwork, and she'll begin what's called clinical rotations, where she goes and works at a hospital and works, she'll do surgery for 2 weeks, she'll do the ICU for 2 weeks, she'll do the ER for 2 weeks. Gets to run the gambit of the medical profession at one hospital. She'll do that for 2 years, and in those 2 years, she'll start to decide what her specialty is. If you asked her right now, I think she's still looking at psychology, psychiatry, but that could change, during your clinical rotations. And then once you decide your specialty, you've got another 3 or 4 years after that of essentially being a resident and learning about that specialty. So we're looking at another 5 to 6 years of her being, learning until she can finally, be an independent doctor doing what she wants to do. So it's a huge undertaking, but she's crushing it. She's a great student. She studies hard and gets good grades. So I'm not worried about that at all.
Yeah, not for the faint of heart. By the virtue of just looking at a program that long and saying like, yeah, I can handle that. I
Oh
like
yeah.
her already. Because I would look at that and be like, What's a little easier though?" You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'd be like,
yeah.
what's faster maybe?" Uh,
I
so
went to music school, so there's there's clearly someone in this relationship who can take on long, grueling tasks, and there's someone who wanted to hit stuff with sticks for 4 years and call it a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and to your credit, I know for a fact you did far more than that in college, but yeah, it's fair. It's fair to say like that some people are in school, like actually doing school, and I certainly wasn't doing school. I think for me it was more like what I actually really loved about Millikan was that I got to do whatever I wanted. So like I got to
Right.
run whole organizations, which is crazy.
Hmm.
And it's just such it was like just a run this mini organization, and then you get out of that and you're like, I mean, I feel like I could be an entrepreneur because I kind of have already done it, and then you can.
Right.
So it's really good at like breaking down kind of that fear. Um, do you guys have you set like a wedding date, or are there any plans that got coronavirus delayed, or like what's the plan there?
No, so we actually lucked out, because she's studying for boards and because I'm working on a campaign till November. We decided that we needed to have a long engagement. So our wedding isn't happening till July of 21. So we kind of get to, skip all the concern right now, which there are a lot of people that we know. I think there have been four weddings between the two of us that we were actually supposed to stand up in this summer that have all gotten canceled.
Yeah.
Um, and so, we're really fortunate in that, we haven't had to consider canceling anything. We had to move our engagement photos back, which like, oh no. But the one thing that we are worried about right now is, July 21 is still far away. I mean, it's a year and 2 or 3 months away, but so many of the guests to our wedding are going to be flying in from Nigeria, from London, from across the globe. Folks are going to be flying in, and we're worried about their ability to get a visa. What are airlines going to look like?
Right.
Even in a year and 3 months. And so, our wedding is supposed to be this massive affair with folks from all over the globe, and we just don't know right now if that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah, man, because the global timeline on this is obviously way slower than the state timeline and even the
Yeah.
American timeline. It's got long lasting impacts here and travel bans and lots of things to think about for you guys. We got we got so lucky. I think Andrew and I with our timing, like it could not have been better. We just did it
Right.
in August, and it was maybe the last chance we would have to not have this like affect what we're going to be able to do. So I feel really really lucky about that, and that we had all our family and friends there. But I have a childhood friend whose wedding was supposed to be in this month, and they had to postpone until they're thinking like I think it's
Mm-hmm.
November. And
Yeah.
Andrea's maid of honor, her best friend Emily, had to push theirs back a year, and it's just it's so unfortunate because that's such a big event, and you don't want to stall it. You want to be able to do
Right.
it. It's your life, but at the same time, a huge piece of that, at least for me with the wedding, is like I want to be able to share this with people. Like that's really the only reason for me to even do it.
Yeah.
Like I know my relationship's great. I'm here because I want my whole family to be here and have a great day with us.
Yeah.
So that's the point, man. Well, on the brighter side, as two dudes that have recently proposed to women, I thought it would be cute if you told me how your proposal went down. What's
Oh
what's your
man.
story? How'd you make it happen?
This is I love telling this story. Really glad you asked. So, I've known that I was going to propose to Io for a while. Um, she's she's the coolest person I know, and like she's going to be a doctor. So like, gotta get on that.
Yeah, nailed
But
it.
yeah. um, so she's so busy with school, and I was so busy with work, and I had planned, and so what you need to understand about mine and Io's relationship is that we're both, so busy all the time that there's so often that wrenches get thrown into our plans. I mean, there was a 1 year period in our relationship where I don't think we were together for one major event. So Valentine's Day, birthdays, Christmas, there was like a full year where we didn't see each other on big holidays because on my birthday she had a conference in Philly. On her birthday it was the election cycle, so I was busy. And so we've just our entire relationship has just been like sacrificing those moments for our careers and making sure that we're still professionally advancing. So that's important to the story. So I had the ring. It was hidden at her friend's house, and I had called all of our friends. I mean, all of our friends and family. I had called her brother and his fiance. I had called my brother and his wife. I had called a bunch of the girls that I knew were going to be her bridesmaids. I called a bunch of the groomsmen, and I said, "Hey, I have this huge plan to propose to Io. What I'm going to do is we're going to go to St. Louis. I'm going to take her to the botanical gardens. I'm going to ask her at the botanical gardens. Her sister's going to be there to take photos. And then we're going to go to brunch, and you're all going to be there to celebrate our engagement. So will you come down to St. Louis this weekend for this brunch?" And everyone said yes. I mean, we're talking 25 people. We're going to come to St. Louis and be a part of this experience. And on the Thursday before it was supposed to happen, it was supposed to happen on a Saturday. On the Thursday before, she got an email from school that said that on that Saturday she had to present some
Oh
thing at school and they couldn't reschedule it.
no.
And so all she knew was we were going to St. Louis. She didn't know, what was going on. And so she said, "Babe, I'm so sorry, but I have to do this thing." And so I said it was the Thursday before. It was the Thursday the week before. So we had a week gap, right? So I immediately, text everyone. I said, "Hey, we're not doing this anymore." And I'm sitting there and I'm like, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do?" And I texted her brother and his fiance, and I texted my brother and his wife, and her little sister, and I said, "Hey, is everyone in Chicago right now? Like all like those are the people that I knew needed to be a part of this. Were her brother,
Right.
his fiance, and her sister, and then my brother and his wife, who I'm very close with, and they all said, "Yep, we're gonna be here." And so it was the Thursday before, and I said, "Okay, if we're not going to St. Louis next weekend, then we're going to Chicago this weekend, so pack up." And she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yep, we're going to Chicago. We're making it happen." So with like a 60-minute turnaround, no joke, we get in the car, we're on our way to Chicago. We go to Chicago and we meet up with her brother and his fiance, and I'm literally planning this whole thing in the car on the car ride to Chicago. I'm like texting her brother on the side, throwing everything together.
Yeah.
So we get into Chicago. She thinks we're just going to meet her brother, but I drop her off at a nail salon, and her brother's fiance is there too. And I said, "Well, you have been working so hard with school and everything, and Lauren has been working so hard. So your brother and I are buying you guys a nail treatment, a manicure pedicure." Really, what it is I knew that she wanted her nails done for the photos of the ring.
Of course.
So
Of
so
course.
we drop them off, and then her brother and I go to this spot in Rosemont, Illinois. It's this really pretty spot. It has all these lights, and it's this big park, and we scout out a spot, and then we tell them to meet us there, and then about 2 minutes later, I'm on one knee asking her to marry me. Uh,
Beautiful.
she said yes, which is good news. But it was really funny because I was standing there with her brother, and he, his fiance and Io turned the corner, and he goes, "There they are." And I took a picture of my Apple Watch, and my heart rate was at 161 beats per minute.
Yeah, man. Yep. That's how
Yeah.
it feels. That's no joke. I
So go ahead.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I love that. I love that. So, did she know when you did the manicure thing? Because I feel like girls know. Do they? Unless that's a regular thing you get for her. Did she ever let on that she had some suspicions?
Her theory was that it was going to happen soon. It was not that it was going to happen within the
Not
hour.
that day. Yeah,
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah, well, that's good of you. I think part of my motivation in asking that is, of course, then I get to come back and
yeah.
share my own here. But what I thought is funny is that I don't know if our stories could be more opposite. Like on almost every level. Like
I
you
love it.
started by saying you don't get to spend as much time together as you'd like. I think since I met Andrea, and I think you can attest this because you were there
Yes,
at that time. Since then, there we have been together 24/7. I mean,
right.
not literally. We've had work things and travels and
Yeah,
whatever, but like there's I think from the outside people find that quite odd and think we're very very codependent. But the truth is, I just like her better than anyone. So like I opt, and we both opt to just spend that amount of time with
yeah,
each other, which I get from my end because she's super cool. I don't know why she opts to spend that many hours with me, but it works.
yeah,
Um, so for me, planning this was crazy complicated because we're involved in every plan we make together. So I had to ship the ring to my neighbor, who was a good buddy, and have him hang on to it for me. And
mm-hmm.
I planned out this whole thing where I was going to take her on a camping trip. We always go on a camping trip on her birthday, and so I was like, you know what, you're busy. She had some work thing going on. I was like, I'll just plan it this time. Like it's no big deal. I'll plan it. I'll surprise you. It'll be fun. And so we go out to a great camping spot, like deep in the mountains in Colorado, like way west of Denver, and camped for a night. Next day, I took her on a hike and proposed on the hike because she loves that. I mean, I
Love
don't think there's a
that.
better environment for her like than a being on
Mm-hmm.
a hike. So that was like that's perfect. And she, unlike your fiance, I don't think wanted anybody around. Like she
Mm-hmm.
and we had talked about it. She's like, no, that's for us. Like that's our
Yeah.
thing. She didn't want a manicure of any type. She just like wanted to totally be surprised. So we were already so opposite. But what I can say we have in common is I've been with this girl for 5 years at that point, and now it's 7, I want to say. Um, so I knew she was going to say yes. We have talked
Right.
about it. It's a normal thing. And also, by the way, guys, you shouldn't ask unless you know they're going to say yes. Like, I hate
Yes.
watching
Oh
proposal
my
videos where girls
gosh.
say no, because it's like, dude, you didn't know. Like, you were not
Yep.
locked in for her, and
Yep.
you needed to be aware of that.
Yep.
But still, the person I've known the most in my life, uh, heart rate just through the roof, just
Oh my gosh.
absolutely. It's so nerve wracking. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't even explain it to myself. But that was quite sweet. And then I had surprised her because I took her to Glenwood Springs and had like another 2 nights for us in this really nice hotel with there's like an adventure park there and there's hot springs there that are just real romantic. So we just got to do this whole like engage moon is what I call it
That's
after that. So
awesome.
that was very much like our time. But yeah, I think it is a major milestone for guys, and I think that we know that if you're serious about it in that moment, you know that, and your body tells you like this is serious, dude. Like take this
Yeah.
seriously, and
Yeah.
and this is the real deal. But yeah, I think it's fun as I see my friends doing this now. I think I was on the earlier end of it, and mostly that's just because we have known each other for so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to watch people kind of do this now and be like, all right, like my turn's up, and I know
Mm-hmm.
I nailed it, and so, uh, just go for it, guys, just make it happen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Make sure she's gonna say yes, but
good lord,
absolutely go for
yeah,
it.
and don't propose on like a bridge where the ring might drop into the water,
Oh my
and
gosh.
people do it on like
Ugh.
slippery rocks under waterfalls, and it's like the ring's gone, like
Yep.
forever.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's just a
Couple
thing,
grand.
but in that moment, you
Jeez.
don't want anything to mess with that moment. You had your
Yeah.
moment where she had to do that presentation. You had to reconfigure. When we were about to go on our hike, she literally got stung by a bee on
Oh
her
my
ring finger
gosh. Oh my
as we were
gosh.
leaving to go on this hike. I've got the ring burning a hole in my pocket, and I'm like, is her finger gonna be too swollen to put a ring on it in a minute? Like,
I can't
that's
imagine.
just that's just
That's
nature screwing
wild.
with me right there.
Yeah. Well,
Just messing with my head.
I was so excited when you guys got engaged because uh I'm sure you had an idea that I was going to bring this story up, but when we were in college, I remember I believe it was your first date, I didn't think that she thought it was a date, and we made a bet
Yes.
that I lost in horrible fashion, and
Yeah.
so I loved seeing that you guys were engaged because I've told this story before, and I tell people I think it's the most wrong I've ever been about anything. And I
Yeah.
and I suffered the consequences, and then, I see you guys, you know, getting married, you have this business, you're traveling all around. I love keeping up with you guys. I love seeing you guys, doing yoga in the middle of a desert or all that fun stuff, especially because I live such an opposite life. I mean, I am a city dweller for sure.
Right.
And so I love seeing you guys getting out and doing your thing and running your business. And I always harken back to the fact that I believe it was your freshman year, my junior year. Um, I didn't think that she had the same feelings for you that you had for her, and I was wildly
Yeah.
wrong, and I've never been more happy to be wrong in my entire life.
Yeah, it worked out. It was in the height of the popularity of How I Met Your Mother.
Right.
So of course it wasn't just make a bet. It was make a
Oh,
slap bet.
it was a slap
Um,
bet. Yeah.
which after which we had gone on a date and we called her up, and I think there were probably 10 other people in my room at that moment,
Yeah.
waiting to hear on the phone if we had an independent party call her.
Yep.
Uh, Connor McGarry
Yep.
made the call, I think, and asked, "Was that a date?" And the room erupted as she said yes. And I knew that my hand was gonna hurt, but your face was gonna hurt worse.
Oh
And
man.
that's where it
There's
went
a
from there.
recording of
No,
that slap somewhere.
is there really? That could probably.
Someone has it. I don't have it, but
What's the
someone
statute of
does.
limitations on assault? Like, do I need to be nervous about that? Actually, that is kind of crazy to me that so many different things that we did were recorded. I mean, we were just on the tail end, luckily, of being kids who got to do crazy things and not always have a camera on their faces about it. I
Hmm.
feel so bad for younger kids who just can't just exist without the potential of going on the internet for something that you did at 14. I mean, that's just
Right.
super unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, you're supposed to be able to mess up in small scale. It's practice for the real world where the
Right.
consequences are more real and it's large scale. But now all of a sudden, large scale has come to 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't really want to see any videos surface from college because it was college. You know what I mean?
Right.
I didn't do anything particularly heinous, but it'd just be kind of embarrassing. Yeah,
Right. And that's and I mean, like I said, I mean, my political beliefs were different in college, and now I work in politics. Now, I don't think like everyone that I work with, I tell that story to. Like I voted for Mitt Romney in 2012, and I obviously work on the Democrat side, and no one's ever mad at me. No one's ever like, "Oh, well, we're not going to hire you because of that reason." But no, you're exactly right. College, I think was a time for us to learn a lot about ourselves and to learn a lot about what not to do.
yeah,
And we were at the very beginning of Snapchat, I remember,
yeah.
because that was every meeting we ever had, we'd be Snapchatting, pictures of each other back and forth, and that was always fun. But yeah, it's wild to see that, there's so many kids. I look at my nieces, every moment of their life is chronicled, you know
Yeah,
and
yeah,
shared, and it's great for me because I don't live near them, so I get to see photos and I get to interact with them through FaceTime and stuff. But you know I look back at my childhood, and I thought I had a bunch of pictures, but now, I mean, it's you have 10 pictures from every day of your life starting from when you're born now. It's
yeah.
wild.
Massive, massive, and it's exactly that. It's well, and it's changing even more now. The college experience is even more different during this quarantine. I have two cousins in college right now who I love to death, and they had their whole semester canceled, and now they
Right.
have to live at home, and they still have to take all their classes, and they have to do it online, and they can't go out outside at all and see even their hometown friends. I mean, it's really, really unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
My younger cousin Jake, who was in my wedding, he's got a girlfriend who it's quite similar. He's a Delta Sig, of course. Had
Mm-hmm.
to had to had to get with the right organization. And he's at Indiana State, and he met his girlfriend his freshman year, quite similar to my trajectory here now. So I'm like, okay, in all realistic purposes, this could easily be his Andrea,
Yeah.
and I don't know what happens with Andrea in my story if we have to take an entire semester off of school and can't be anywhere near each other. I just
Yeah.
think, like, that just breaks my heart a little bit because it's like, and odds are it's not. Odds are it's not his Andrea, and that's fine. But as someone who had that exact experience, that is totally sad to me.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly know where colleges recover from this one. I don't know what happens next. I don't know how colleges are justifying kids paying full tuition for online courses now, and I
Right.
think it's going to create a lot of changes. And I mean, I'm always a fan of progress. I think university's been moving online. I don't think that that's to be stopped by any means. But it's a formative time. It's an explorative time, and it's sort of a safe way to do it. And so,
Yeah. The
man,
best analogy for that I saw, and of course I saw it on Twitter because I'm never not online, was someone said, imagine paying $23,000 to see Beyonce live front row, and it's a hologram. That's what
yeah,
paying full tuition to do online classes is like right now.
yeah, yeah. You've got, I mean, there so many universities trying to do better. My sister now works at Purdue, and helps build their online education program, and so she's fighting for online classes to actually be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
so many of these kids are taking classes that are just slapdashed, put together by professors who are way too old to understand this technology, and it's
Yeah.
like you're just thrown back in high school where it doesn't even feel real anymore.
Right.
It's totally unfortunate. I think so much of being in a college classroom even is not is not what the teacher's putting up on the board. It's that you get to raise your hand and argue with the kid across the class who's exploring their own thing right now and has, really radical beliefs about this thing, and you get to kind of debate that live. And I don't see that happening. I don't think you can possibly be engaged in the same way
Right.
in
Right.
this moment.
Yeah.
Not until we've made it better,
Yep.
man. Oh, this is good stuff. This is just quality quarantine debating here. I uh, I of course want to know too about. I want to talk about track farms. Can we talk about track farms? Is that okay?
Yeah, we can talk about
Is that a
track
public thing?
farms. Ah,
So, for tell us what this is. It's quite cool, and I'll be happy to share my experiences. But tell us about track farms.
yeah. So my brother, Cody, and his buddy Trevor. My brother and I grew up on a farm about an hour and a half south of Chicago, and my brother actually bought the farm from my parents. So it's this 10-acre plot, and it's got about I think 8 acres of field in it. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, my brother and his buddy Trevor decided that they were going to start growing hemp. So they got all the business licensing and everything. It's easier to obtain in Illinois. They were one of the first uh, commercial hemp farms, small farms in Illinois. And what they sell is they sell CBD products. So they literally take this hemp out of the ground. They grind it up and they do a couple things with it. One is they'll roll it into these things called pre-rolls. So it looks like a little joint, but it's CBD. It's not marijuana. It's not THC. Um, and you can smoke it as a joint. The other thing they do is they sell it just as the flower. So, not that I would have any experience with this, but if anyone listening to the podcast has ever bought weed before, it looks really similar to that. And you can use that to roll your own CBD joints, or you can use it I like to put it into cooking oil and then make CBD cookies and things like that. And then the thing that we just actually launched this week is CBD tinctures, which a lot of people know about CBD oil. CBD tinctures are very, very similar. They're just a little better because they have a longer shelf life, and their bioavailability, which is this term for basically how it works in your body, is much better. And so it's literally it's called Track Farms because it's Trevor Ruth and Cody Kerrigan, Track. Um,
Cute.
and it's genuinely it's just a bunch of it's them and their buddies just get together and are running this business, and I do some of the digital side for them when I'm not working on the campaign trail. But yeah, it's such a cool little company. We always say it's just a bunch of good buds hanging out and growing some hemp, and it's really cool. And I know you recently bought some, right?
I did.
And yeah,
Yes.
I would love to hear what you
S-
think.
Well, first of all, I think I had to educate myself a little bit because I didn't realize that there was a difference in the two types of plants. So
Mm-hmm.
there is the hemp plant, and then is the other one called the marijuana plant? I mean, what is there's like two literally different plants here in the same family, right?
Yeah, yeah. So one plant has THC, which is the psychedelic factor. So that's the thing
The
that
psychoactive ingredient of
yeah,
marijuana.
yeah, that makes you high. But the hemp plant, the ones that Cody and Trevor grow have cannabidiol, cannabidiol. I just do the marketing,
Yeah, I'm
but
lost on how to pronounce it too. I know how to
yeah,
write it down. Yeah,
yeah,
it sounds right.
I believe it's cannabidiol, which is CBD, and that has some of the same effects, but none of the psychoactive effects. So um, people use it for a bunch of different stuff. So I know folks who say, oh, I've replaced my morning coffee with a pre roll, or I know people who say if I'm getting sleepy at the end of the night, I'll smoke a pre roll and that'll help me get to bed. And
Yeah.
then the one of the uses that we've seen folks talk about is if you get quote unquote too high. So, say you're trying THC edibles for the first time and you take too much and you're like, oh, I'm far too stoned right now. Smoking a CBD pre-roll or taking some CBD oil uh, should actually, and these none of these are medical claims, right? We're not doctors, but should potentially help to make you feel less high. So that's
Right.
some of the uses people use it for.
So of course CBD has been coming up, and of course, like everyone else, I've tried it to see if it would make any sort of difference for me. As far as I understand, it's major for inflammation. It's huge for taking down your inflammation in your body,
Hmm.
and it seems like it's. So I've learned quite a bit about the history of the hemp plant and how it's sort of evolved with humans. It's been compared to like the puppy of
Hmm.
plants.
Yep.
Like it literally exists to and has grown alongside humans to serve us in a myriad of ways. Like any plant that is really useful to humans, as it can make rope, it's a good source of protein. It even provides you an intoxicant effect. I mean, that's the definition of a plant that has evolved along with humans in the same way that dogs coming from wolf
Yeah.
backgrounds have come to rely on us and domesticate with us. So it's like this domesticated plant. It's so interesting, really. And people do dismiss it from the THC element. And the truth is, for me, I think I'm allowed to publicly say that. Of course I've had marijuana. Everybody, all right. It's. I went to college in the 2010s, and so of course I did.
Right.
So um, I actually had. You know what though? I had some bad experiences with marijuana. Truly, like I had some really, really
I think I
bad.
remember that actually.
I don't remember. I shared one of them with you. I had it and it was fine, and I had it another time and it was a really, really bad day. It's like genuinely one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's because of my own self. I think that ultimately, if you take some sort of psychoactive drug and you're having a bad time, it's probably because you're pent up and upset about things, and I'm certain
Right.
that's what that was going on. So I'm not certain that I'm ready to dip my toe into the THC world again. But CBD I had tried as an oil, and I had some that was gifted to Andrea that was like a stick that you can like roll on sore muscles and stuff. And the truth is, I had never noticed any effects of it at all. And I think I'm a big dude. I'm 6'4". I'm like 200 pounds. Like I'm a big guy.
Yeah.
I just don't think I my tolerance was low enough to like even feel the oil or anything like that. Andrea would be like, "Wow, I actually feel really relaxed and it can help with anxiety." And I was like, "I don't feel a damn thing when I try this."
Yeah.
Um, but I ordered, so I had found Track Farms and I asked you about it, and you were nice enough to give me a little discount code, and I bought a pack of 5 of those pre-rolls. And I got to try them out here in Arizona. Actually, had them shipped out here, and I still feel like I'm breaking the law as I smoke it because
Right.
I know how it smells. But I actually think it smells less potent, if I can be honest, than
Yeah.
traditional marijuana. Like, I don't think it smells nearly as strong. Um, so Andrea and I've had it a couple times, and I can say it's lovely. Like, and also, she and I like to just like have different things we can do. Like we'll go outside and sit and just have a glass of wine and talk. Like that's lovely. If you don't do that regularly with your partner, you're absolutely missing out. Like you just
Yeah.
sit outside in an evening, have a glass of wine. Maybe it's like before dinner, so that glass of wine really hits you good. Whatever it is. Um, and so she and I noticed that if we just kind of wait until it gets dark out, we won't get any stares from anybody who's going to walk by and smell what
Hmm.
smells like marijuana and start judging us or trying to get in our faces about it. Because, of course, in Arizona, marijuana is not yet legal recreationally. I think it's legal medically, though. Um,
Hmm.
so we'll sit out and set up some chairs and we'll just like enjoy watching the stars come out. We're kind of on the west side of Tucson, so we can see a ton of stars. And we've had these pre-roll CBD joints, and it's lovely. It's like a great excuse to sit outside and just chat. And it was really the
Yeah.
first time I had noticed CBD having any effect on me. I felt like as I do it, that voice in your head that's like I don't know if everybody has this, but there's the not a creepy way the voice in your head, but the internal dialogue for me is about 3 sentences ahead of where I'm typically actually
Yes.
living.
Yep.
I plan everything and every possible conversation, every possible outcome. I'm way overthinking that way,
Yeah.
and that was the one thing I noticed first. Was I was like, whoa, I feel way more in this moment. I definitely feel
Mm.
like that planning self is just taking a rest. I don't feel like I don't have my faculties. I don't feel like I could respond to a bad situation. That was one of the things that always scared me about marijuana is like you're sometimes
Yeah. Yeah.
incapacitated. and I'm a guy that likes to believe that I like to keep Andrea safe and feel like I can be in charge of what I need to be in charge of as a guy. Um, but this does not make me feel incapacitated. It just was like I just feel more present. It was really really nice. It's a good excuse to sit outside. I'm nervous because I know my dad's going to listen to this, and his opinions on marijuana I think skew to the negative. But
Yeah.
pops, trust me on this one. This is not the thing you don't like. This is something that is quite good and very very relaxing. Really good
Yeah.
time. So
Well,
and then you moved out of Illinois, of course, right as they made marijuana legal. So that's
yes.
that's the other thing you did was leave right in time for that one.
Yeah. And that's okay because like you said, the one thing that, my line of work absolutely requires is I have to be able to rapidly respond to things. Um,
Yes.
when the news changes, when something happens, politically, it's my job to be ready for that. And so THC doesn't, there's no way to be ready for stuff when
Yeah, I
yeah.
feel that same way. My job it's different from yours. It's not in terms of a professional job,
Hmm.
um, but I recognize. I'm not trying to say this is everybody's relationship. In my relationship, I'm the crisis manager. Like
For
if
sure.
if things are going wrong, if somebody's getting rude, man, I go to places where I've never been before. I'm quite
Yeah.
often in cities where I literally don't know the story of anyone around me. I don't know
Hmm.
how this town works. I don't know what's up. I don't know who you are that's walking by. So I have to just feel
Yeah.
like I can be ready to handle situations.
Yeah.
I think I'd be the natural one if someone was starting to get rowdy. And I like learning about self defense. I've learned quite a bit about it. And I feel like if of the two of us, if someone's getting rough, Andrea's not going to be the one to tackle that person and put him in a
Right.
chokehold. That's
Right.
my job.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
recognize that. So I don't like things that make me feel like I can't do that, and that's what THC does. I mean, it makes you
Yeah.
incapable of being able to handle situations in that
Yeah.
moment.
Well, I'll tell your dad
Yeah,
right now because I know he's either on his first or second listen through of your podcast right now. But
you really do listen to my show, don't
I
you?
listen to
That's
your
cool.
show.
You're
Um,
you're very very kind. I appreciate that.
but I reactivated your discount code, so it's 10. I reactivated. I gave you a nicer discount than I'm giving everyone else. But for anyone who's listening
Yes.
to the show, for your dad, if he wants to try it, if they go to track-farms.com, uh, or they can just they can find it on social media. Track Farms. You'll see it's a green circle with a track marks in it. Uh, the code is Tyler 10, Tyler 10, and it's 10% off anything, your entire purchase order for your first time purchasing. So anyone who's listening to the podcast, for your dad, Tyler 10, Tyler 10. I just reactivated while we were having this conversation, so uh, and
Yes.
everyone can try CBD and see what the effects are on them.
You just made me a legitimate podcaster, right? Because like
Yeah,
I've never been able to do like, hey everybody, I'm gonna do that on future episodes too. I'm just gonna
yeah,
say, Track Farms is my sponsor and go get 10% off.
dude, you are more Tyler 10.
That's
I'm gonna
slick.
keep that active, and if you want to say that every episode is sponsored by Track Farms, you are more than welcome to.
I do think I've talked to quite a few guests who this could be useful for. I mean, I've talked to some top athletes and
Yeah.
really, really. I mean, I've been doing a ton of athletes lately. Actually, is just who I've been talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing sport like that, I mean, I do a lot. I do quite a bit of training, and your body's inflamed a lot, and it feels that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've got a better thing for inflammation that is quite so fun to do. So everybody, trackfarms.com, track-farms.com. Use
There you
code
go.
Tyler10 and get 10% off your Strangers Worth Meeting listen here.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Yeah, well, it's been fun, and I liked trying the ones I have. I'm certainly going to be ordering some more because it's a lot of fun. It's a good excuse to, particularly just to sit outside and just to have something to do. I think I've had pipes and cigars and all that stuff, and I like
Yeah.
doing that from time to time, but it doesn't make me feel that good. You
Mm-hmm.
taste that for a few days, it's just kind of like it feels gross. This is not the same at all, so
It's
that's fun.
the last thing I will say. So I think you remember in college, I actually smoked cigarettes. I quit cigarettes in 2016. And
Good for you.
so I haven't, like, the hardest thing about it is I can't have a cigar at a wedding. I had a meeting the other day that was at a not the other day. This was obviously pre pandemic,
Pre
but
quarantine.
yeah, it was at a hookah bar, and I just had to sit there. I couldn't because the thing about
Oh,
a nicotine or a tobacco addiction is that the second you have it again, it's a snowball.
yeah,
The really nice thing is that CBD, when I smoke the pre-rolls, it's not the same story. I don't
yeah,
get cravings or anything like that. So it's actually been a really nice replacement for nicotine and tobacco.
yeah. Nice, man. Good.
You know?
Well, the really the final thing I kind of wanted to talk about in this episode is I think a big one. I think it's part of the whole reason that this episode is even exists, and I think you'd have a good perspective on this. You're quite a social person.
Hmm.
I have done my best to have as few friends as possible. Unfortunately, no, that's not true. I It's not on purpose, but what happens is you go to a high school and then you go to a college where no one from your high school is going, and
Hmm.
then you go from college to a town where you don't know anybody, and then you go move out to Colorado and start your own business, so you work from home with yourself, and
Hmm.
then you move into an RV and live on the road.
Yeah.
So in my life, the opportunities to have long-term friends, which I think a lot of the time has required being in person with people, I think that's one of those things that you just can't replace it.
Yeah.
um, Luckily, the internet's making it easier, and that's why you and I have been able to remain friends, and I really love that. But I think it's hard enough as it is for guys to have guy friends, and it's something I struggle with daily. I'd like a genuine. This is me being just full me. I don't even know how full me I go on this show,
Yeah.
but it's hard. It's hard. You see people who it's like, man, those are great guy friendships, but I would not sacrifice the life that I've picked of doing this on the road and owning my business in exchange for that, and so I have to live with that's my choice in a way.
Yeah.
Um, but what are your thoughts on this is so broad. This I wish I had a more detailed question. Guy friendships in this time period. Like what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? Like how can dudes be able to actually connect um still, especially if they're not in the same place?
Yeah. I love that question, and it you're exactly right that this podcast and the reason for this episode is so pertinent. So, one of the things that I know you had to do within the last year, and one of the things that I'm now doing is selecting your groomsmen, right? So you're
Yes.
deciding who um, who is the person that's going to stand next to you on the most important day of your life. Now, I think you had only about three or four from what I saw on photos.
Yeah,
Um,
I had three. I kept it tight.
yeah,
I had another guy from our fraternity who's my good friend Ryan, who
yeah,
was my big brother in that
mm-hmm,
fraternity. I had a local friend who I had made out in Colorado, who's a great guy, and he's the one who knew me best, sort of from that time period. And then I had my cousin.
mm-hmm,
And beyond that, if you had asked me to find more groomsmen, I don't know that I could have. And I think that
yeah,
that's a little sad. I had two that I was not blood related to, you know.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I think that you know the movie The Wedding Ringer, the Kevin Hart movie with
yeah,
Josh
yeah,
Gad.
yeah.
Yeah, that movie sums that up for me. It's like I think guys don't have someone they can just call and be friends with, and that seems unfortunate. I
Yeah,
don't even know what causes that. Maybe it's just guys are closed off or something. I'm not really sure.
yeah.
But
I
it's a challenge.
have
So go back to what you're saying.
no, yeah. So I have 12 groomsmen. Um,
Oh,
yeah. Well, it's a really big wedding. The guest list as of right now is somewhere between 500 and 600. So our weddings are going to be
jeez.
on completely different. But the the thing about it is most of my groomsmen still live in Chicago. They're folks that I met either in college that also moved to Chicago, or I met while I was in Chicago. Um, or they lived, somewhere. I just haven't lived near any of these guys for 2 years now. And so when I was deciding, the decision was really easy because I have just about 12 people. My brother is my best man. Io's brother is part of the wedding party. But the rest of these guys are my friends that I'm close with. And the way that we've stayed in touch, no joke, is pretty often. I would say I talk to each of these guys at least once every 2 weeks, and we have a conversation exactly like this. It takes about an hour, go on a walk. Um, and I just talk to my buddies on the phone, and I started doing that so long ago because I had moved away from all my friends that it's kind of been seamless during quarantine. Everyone's looking for an excuse to get outside right now, so what me and my friends have been doing is just calling each other. um, I don't know if you remember Austin Myers. He wasn't a Delta Sig, but he was in the music program at Millikan. We went to school with
I
him.
don't think so. I don't think so,
um,
but
yeah, him. We talk all the time. We just, hey, I'm going crazy, stuck in my apartment. I'm gonna go on an hour walk, and I'm gonna call you. I know you remember Caleb Busher. He's the same way. I
of
mean,
course.
Caleb and I, and if you remember all these guys, Aaron Tallman, Eddie Pluhar, Danny. I'm trying to think of who else was in on this. But we used to do a weekly phone call where each person would bring a new topic, and the five or six of us who were on the phone would discuss that topic. And it was, I mean, it was everything. It ran the gambit of different topics. But that's how I've maintained my guy relationships after moving away from all my friends, and then after being in quarantine, is just getting on the phone and just chatting about the world for a while.
Yeah, you've made yourself like just an inside podcast in a way. It's like
Right.
it makes me think of like Barstool News podcast kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
just dudes talking current events.
Yep. Yep. And
You've
that's I'm on at least one of those phone calls every 2 days, I'd say.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I think that that's a really cool way to do is just build a ring and say like, but I think that's the tricky part for guys too, isn't it? It must be something about having to be vulnerable. Vulnerable enough to say like,
Right.
you are a good friend, let's not lose touch. Like let's
Mm-hmm.
just not.
Yeah.
And it's a decision, but it means that one person has to talk first, and it just feels like a negotiation for some reason. You know, I, it's a theme I think about a lot, and I'm sure I'll explore plenty on this podcast. And even part of the reason of this podcast is that I've met some very cool dudes, and the
Yeah.
podcast for me, I love doing it. I'm passionate about podcasting. It's a big thing in my life, but it's also a great excuse to be able to meet people where I'm traveling. So I'm like, man, I'd love to just like meet that dude who runs a jujitsu studio. Like that would be awesome. And here
Right.
we go. Now we get to sit down for an hour and a half and really meet each other.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, and you've done the same way. It's just you're not releasing them online like I do.
Well, this is we've taken the see, the funny thing is, and I don't know if you picked up on this, but when you messaged me and you were like, "Hey, do you want to come on the podcast?" I started asking communications director questions. I was like, "All right, what equipment do we need on my end? Can we schedule this
Yeah,
time? Like blah blah blah." Because
right.
I'm so used to scheduling other people to appear on these things. I'm and
Yeah,
and in my head I'm like ready to prepare a talking point memo. I'm like,
right.
oh, I gotta, but um but it's really cool to just like you said, like I got on this call and I was just like, well, I know Tyler runs his show. I'm sure he's gonna have a topic, but it's been great just sitting here just chatting with you about everything and nothing, man.
Yeah, that's the idea. Everything and nothing. I should have
Yeah.
called it that. Actually, you just sort of blew my name out of the water. But thanks for that. But okay, I have one. Are you trying to run? Because I have one more thing for you. I was another
No, I got a
topic
minute.
for us.
My dog just scratched at my door, but he can wait. I got another couple minutes.
What's the worst thing that can happen? You got a clean pee off the floor. I mean,
Right.
it is what well, no, that's fine. Okay, so I got one more thing for you. I thought it'd be fun. As we have not seen each other in how many years has it been? Maybe six or
I think
seven.
it's got to be,
Six.
yeah, I think it's 6.
Okay. So what I wanted to know from you, solely from the small amount of communication that we have, because I'm not in your phone crew,
Hmm.
and the pictures you see online, I wanted to know what do you think is the biggest. Okay, we're gonna do you first. You first.
Okay.
So I was gonna say, what do I think is the biggest thing that's changed about you in that time period, and then I was gonna see
Mm,
if you can tell me if I'm even close, or if you think there's a bigger thing that's changed about you.
okay.
I I would take a stab at. I think you are more serious. I think that you had a lot of fun in college, and I think you still have a lot of fun as a person. And I think you like locked down into serious mode, and you are quite focused now That would be my guess. Is that you're driven. You've got a mission. I think that's the biggest change for you.
hmm I
What would you
think
say?
that's number two, and
Okay.
I think the only thing that is above that is that I, in those 6 years, have learned the art of listening, which was not a skill that I had in college. I believed that
I
I
gave you
was.
more credit for that in college than other people did, by the way. I never thought you didn't listen, but I buy this. Keep going.
Yeah, no, no. The most important thing I've learned, which I think is one of the most important things that any straight white male in America can learn, is that I am often wrong, and it is often time for me to listen and not speak. And that I think that's the biggest shift that I've had, the most important thing I've learned. But then with that comes an element of seriousness that I also don't think I had when you and I were living together in the Delta Sig house. So no, I think that's I think you're spot on with that. That's a really good guess.
Nice. Yes. Cool. This is going off of a lot of assumptions and literally just social media. Like that's all I've
Yeah.
got to go on here, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so challenge time for you. What would you? Oh shit! I didn't actually think of my answer. But what would you guess is the biggest thing that has changed about me?
Well, the first thing's the beard, but that's
Well, that's fair.
man, the biggest thing that's changed. I don't want to steal your answer because I don't think that's right. I think you were very, very serious in college. Like you said, you were running those organizations. You were doing a really good job. But there's a word I'm looking for that I just can't find. You've gotten more of this thing, and this is, me being terrible at my job as a communicator, not being able to think of a word. But I think you've become someone that I see as having leadership uh, tendencies, and it's not that you weren't that in college. It's just that over the last 6 years, it's been very clear that you are very good at organizing and problem solving and moving things forward. And I can't tell you how many times I've had the idea to start a podcast. Um, my buddy Jason and I had the idea a while ago, or how many times I actually was thinking about starting a business, those times when I was freelancing and I was like, well, I can just turn this into a thing. But you are an absolute doer. You get the things done, and I don't know if that's the thing that's changed, but I do think that's the thing that you've most gotten like solidified. Like that when you put your mind to something, you're going to get it done, and I think you've really grown into that person.
This is just stroking the hell out of my ego right now, which I love that. This is such a good idea. Man, I'm so full of good ideas. Um, no, I I think you're probably right on track. I think that doing things. I think for me, it's just like you. There was something that had to change about me in order to become more like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, I had to shed a lot of angst. I had to be a
Mm,
lot less angry. I had to worry way less about things I could not control. But what I was
mm-hmm.
able to do by doing that was realize that I can expand the circle of things I can control.
Yeah.
Um, and so I can say, I have the ability to start a podcast. I have the ability to start a business. I can take those risks, and I'm comfortable living in what I can do and not having as much expectation of what other people can do or others do. Because I think that there's a version where you sit and you say like I could start a podcast, except what about all these things? And those
Right.
aren't things
Right.
that you need to worry about if you're going to actually go and do it. And so much more, it's become like start and be willing to fail and be willing to be bad and recognize that when you start a podcast, no one's going to listen for the first 100 episodes at least.
Mm-hmm.
Although surprisingly, it's been better than that. I'm not to brag, but it's been better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Um, which is surprising. People want to listen to me talk. I don't quite understand it myself, but hey, whatever works for people.
Yeah.
Um, but I think you're probably right on there. And I think
Yeah.
the reason I wanted to ask that is because we've all got these assumptions as you grow away from people, and I think that was a core element for me of this episode is that if there's one message I want to put out to people, it's like do your best to stay connected with people who you care about. I think that that's huge. I
Yeah,
think we don't in this day and age, it's so easy. It's as easy as a phone call. It's as easy as a message on occasion, but we don't exercise it enough. I think especially as guys, it feels vulnerable. It's been something I've had to teach myself how to do. Even asking you to come on the podcast, I was like, I feel like he'd be into this. I think he'd like podcasts.
absolutely. Yeah.
And but I was like, well, what if he doesn't want to do it? And then I just wrecked that whole thing. He's like, oh, this dude just trying to get me on his podcast all the time. So we just worry about things that we shouldn't really be worried about, and it keeps us from engaging with friends. So I think that was the whole reason of doing an episode like this, and hopefully, the brand is strangers worth meeting. Of course, I've had my dad on, so he's not a stranger to
Right.
me, and you are not a
Right.
stranger to me. But I think this format allows even someone who you knew at one point to become not a stranger once again. And I think that
Right.
that's been quite cool. I feel like I get to know you again, and it's been too many years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know,
I agree.
hopefully people can take that away from this. I'll wrap it up so that Doyle or Baylor, which one is tapping on you?
I imagine it's both.
Okay. I'll wrap it up so those guys can go get some relief.
Yeah.
Um, but before we go, let me give people kind of what's your little call to action here. I'm sure you want people to go check out Yinka. Can you give us his website and socials, and also maybe your socials as well, in case people want to check it out?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just pitch everything all at once. So
Yeah.
go to yinkafaleti.com. That's YINKAFALETI.com. Again, he's running for Missouri Secretary of State, which voting rights is important for you no matter where you live. Just check it out. Learn his story. It's a really great story. Yinka Faleti on all platforms, which is a pretty unique handle. So if you search, you'll be able to find him. My socials are all just first name, last name, Connor Kerrigan, which is ConnerKerrigan. I'm always on Twitter, but my opinions are probably annoying. And then the last thing is go to track-farms.com, track-farms.com. And now you can use the code Tyler10 to get 10% off your entire order.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to have to get creative. I've been trying to do my best to get creative with the guest photos while I'm doing this remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get creative once again and find something when I post this out.
Okay.
So people
There is a
can follow
picture of
along
you and I as
playing guitar.
playing guitar in the woods, and it's a very, very funny picture.
That's good. I'll probably use that one. That's perfect. To show off how not bearded I was at one point
Yeah.
in my life. And the beard adds 5 years to the face. It really does,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah.
I think. So find that picture if you want to see that. It's a pretty good one. As always, at @THicksonLife on Instagram. And then I am also using Twitter now, or trying to, at @THicksonLife also. Connor, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been great to catch up with you, man.
Thank you very much, and give your wife my love, all right?
Will do. Thanks, everyone, for listening. You've been an excellent crowd for this episode. And as always, we'll see you on the next episode.